Thank you, Speaker. I rise to support the motion to His Majesty King Charles III to express sympathy at the death of the late Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Speaker, I can still recall at Fernyhurst Primary School the Monday morning assembly, the Australian flag being raised by whoever was on flag duty, the same routine, the same words every week. All the students in line saluting the flag, singing God Save the Queen, and then the oath. I love God and my country. I will faithfully serve the Queen and cheerfully obey my parents, teachers and the laws. I may be on the teachers. As best I can recall the classes of those years, I'm pretty sure by the end of my primary school years, even well into my high school time, I'd been taught more about British history than Australian. Our history of connection with England and with the monarchy was reinforced at every turn. One of my fellow students could rattle off every British king from Alfred on, but none of us could tell you who had been Prime Minister of Australia before Robert Menzies. Mind you, he'd held that position from 1949 to 1966, so that was all many people had known. On March the 5th, 1954, Echuca, the biggest town in my electorate of Murray Plains, was home to barely 5,000 people. Moama across the river may have had close to 3,000 people. Yet at 2 p.m. on that date, when the royal train carrying Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, on their whirlwind tour of the region, it would be greeted, and these are the official figures, not the enthusiastic counts of locals, by 25,000 cheering and adoring well-wishers, all bursting to see the first British monarch to visit Australia. That afternoon, the royal train would carry the royal couple through Mooroopna, Tatura, Echuca, Rochester, Bendigo, Castlemaine and Maryborough. And when the train pulled into the special rail platform built adjacent to the Civic Centre for the occasion, the driver overshot the station, and there was a delay while the train was backed up to let Her Majesty and His Royal Highness alight from the carriage to be met by the Victorian Premier, John Cain Sr. The royal couple had a short walk to the civic offices where the Riverine Herald would report the next day they were tendered an address of welcome by the Borough of Echuca, to the Borough of Echuca by Mayor L.J. Lord. One wonders how many of these scintillating speeches Her Majesty must have endured across her extraordinary reign. To make the young couple feel at home, the Royal Standard was flown above the Civic Centre and the Echuca Federal Band played the national anthem. The Royals then travelled a set route around Echuca before departing at 2:20. 20 minutes later, less the time lost for that platform mishap, and Her Majesty was ready to get back on the train and head for Rochester on her way back to Melbourne. 20 minutes was the culmination of months of planning, coordinating, rehearsing, cooking, refreshing, making sure the Sunday best was spotless and laid out for the occasion. That doesn't even consider how much time was agonised over selecting the right gloves, hat and handbag to complete an outfit the Queen most certainly would never see. But that didn't matter. It never entered anyone's mind. Every one of those 25,000 was there not to be seen, and even a fleeting glimpse at the top of the Queen's chic little hat would have treasured a memory wrapped up and nurtured for years and decades ahead. The reception and progress was a triumph of organisation, and matters went like clockwork crowned the Riv at the time. However, in the final 5 minutes, which made the visit a memorable one for several thousands who clustered around the royal train, as the Queen ascended the platform to enter the train, hundreds of children broke from their reserves and dashed towards the platform, eluding a police barrier, the paper recorded. The Queen and Duke appeared to enjoy this greatly, for she favoured cheering children with wreaths of smiles as the train remained at the platform for several minutes. The Riv also reported that not only had the royal train overshot the platform on arrival, delaying, it reported, the royal couple's alightment. Now they were ready to leave. There was another problem with the train's departure, and it was further delayed, some say by a local who was making sure that the town got their full 20 minutes worth. While this latest embarrassment was dealt with, the paper says the Duke, chatting informally with the Mayor, made light of the earlier hitch, saying they apparently didn't want us to land on your platform and now they don't want us to go away. We are sorry to be going, the Duke told Councillor Lord. Then the train with whistles drowned out by cheering locals, the train disappeared from view and the page turned on Echuca's 20 minutes chapter in a royal history, a royal love affair which has extended another 68 years. This week, as the world came to terms with the loss of this most remarkable woman, who in so many ways transcended the routines of royalty, Murray Plains again had a bit of local drama and despair when a local resident received a 100th birthday card, congratulations, signed by Her Majesty, obviously before her passing. Requests for those royal acknowledgements go through the local MP's office, and now with King Charles on the throne, will continue without missing a beat. A continuity that is, as always has been, one of the strengths of our monarchy. But even something as simple as requesting this correspondence from the King will for some time, I imagine, seem strange, as we are also used to requesting a letter from the Queen for those special birthdays or anniversaries. For everyone in Australia under the age of 80 or thereabouts, this will be the first, because Queen Elizabeth has always been there, had always been there. This is a Queen who went through World War II, whose first UK Prime Minister was Winston Churchill, a towering figure in world history. He was born in 1874, 101 years before Liz Truss, her last Prime Minister, who was born in 1975. Queen Elizabeth clearly had a thing about Australia. She would visit us 15 times, second only to Canada. She would send the Prince of Wales here for 2 terms of school at Geelong Grammar, and her children and grandchildren would make regular trips down under, cementing those links. But mostly I've enjoyed the stories from locals who the Queen brought special memories for, such as former Rochester resident in my electorate who, like most residents in that town, went under in the 2011 floods that devastated so much of northern Victoria. Georgina Roberts still remembers the day she and her husband Steve were some of the chosen few invited to the Melbourne reception with Her Majesty in what would turn out to be the Queen's last visit to Melbourne. It was late October, and earlier that year the couple's home and business in Rochester had both been flooded by the inundation that hit 80% of the town's homes. Georgina says she still has no idea how she and her husband were plucked from, as she called it, soggy obscurity to the vice-regal surrounds of Government House for tea and cakes with the Queen. But flood or not, there was always a silver lining somewhere, and Georgina told the paper we were chosen because we were flood victims, she said. The invitation just turned up in the mail without any warning or any foreknowledge, and as Georgina recalls, I was quite chuffed. She was also amazed at the way the courtiers orchestrated the whole day in Melbourne, right down to the exact spot where everyone was to stand to meet the Queen. Slowly being shuffled forward, Georgina and Steve got to within 1 metre of the Queen, only 3 people away, when the Queen's minders turned her around and headed her in a different direction. She was talking to the people in front of me, Georgina says, so close and yet so tantalising out of reach. No pictures were allowed during the reception. All Georgina has today are the invitations, now framed, and the memory of receiving it, of making the trip to Melbourne and being able to say she'd been to afternoon tea with Her Majesty. In 1970, the Queen also visited my electorate, this time in Swan Hill. In a masterpiece of planning, Her Majesty visited the town on April 7 after travelling up from Melbourne that morning. This time she was not only accompanied by the Duke of Edinburgh, she was also accompanied by the Prince of Wales and Anne the Princess Royal. And yes, for something completely different, they were treated to yet another civic reception, this time hosted by the Mayor Ken Harrison. But at least this one was held at the racecourse, somewhere where Her Majesty could feel at home, even if there was no horses actually racing. The Swan Hill Guardian covered the royal visit, recording the Queen and now King Charles met with locals for what was said to be a brief but hectic hour. The Queen applauded the pioneer settlement, and today there is a memorial plaque near the tourist attractions Paddle Steamer Wharf, marking the monarch's only visit to the region. After the largesse of 60 minutes, not just 20 minutes, Her Majesty and her group were whisked away for the next stop in Portland, where no doubt they were treated to another civic reception. Queen Elizabeth has been part of my life from the day I was born, and judging by the feedback in my office and my social media since her death, she has had the same effect on many, many people. And as I said in that initial post, just moments after Buckingham Palace released its formal statement, it is with a profound personal sadness that I've heard the official notice from Buckingham Palace announcing the death of Queen Elizabeth II. This monarch, this woman, has been much more than the longest-serving ruler of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. She has been a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and possibly above all else, an inspiration to and an unfaltering servant of her people. When she took the throne, she made the commitment to serve her people for every day of the rest of her life, and she has done that. Even as her family was being summoned to her bedside at Balmoral, the Queen had, only days before, played a role in the change of Prime Minister receiving Liz Truss, the 15th Prime Minister of her reign. As I said earlier, when you consider her first British Prime Minister was Sir Winston Churchill, you begin to grasp the times through which Her Majesty lived and served. I doubt we'll see her like again. May her soul rest in peace.